Okay, hello again, this is Ron and my camera assistant Justin, and he's going to be shooting the video, so today I get to use both hands. We're going to reshoot the Triton spark plug how to install the CalVan kit video that I did a couple of years ago. I get a lot of calls and a lot of comments on it, and it was done in two parts. There's a couple of things I do different now. I've done over 1,000 of these. I'm really comfortable with them. And so what I'm going to do is basically show you how to do this again in one video, condensed, a lot more information. Stay tuned if you want question and answers. I'm going to, at the end of this video, I'm going to spend a few minutes telling you the top 5 questions I get asked about how to do this, and I'm going to answer those then. Okay, so what we have right now is 2001 F-250 with a 6.8 V10 in it. And for those of you that heard me say 6.8 V8 on the first video, that was an error and it was just a slip of the tongue. 6.8s are all V10s, and we're going to be dealing with the number 7 plug that blew out on this one. It's an easy one to get to, so the video should be nice and short. Let me go over the tools that I recommend that you have in your possession before you start this job. This job seems extremely difficult. It's actually not once you've done a few of them, but if you don't have the proper tools, you can really make a big mistake that's going to end up costing you valuable time and money. The number one thing I want to say is if anybody tells you got to pull the cylinder head off your engine to fix this, have them call me so I can tell them that they're a little loco in their cabeza. I've had a couple of professional repair shops actually pull 5.4 and 4.6 heads off, send them over to me on my bench for me to put the insert in, and I just kind of shake my head and go, why? It's you know, 30-45 minute job on the outskirts, and it's relatively simple to do. And the argument of metal shavings in the engine, we're going to address that a little bit later on in the video. Okay, so the things that you really need, okay, you need to have a bore scope. I use a snap-on bore scope. This is a high definition camera. I don't know if you can rent these. I know people have talked about that particular freight store that sells cheap tools. If you get one from there, that's fine. I think it's more important to just have the camera so you can see what you're doing. This camera's got a couple of features on it that I don't think you can get on those that help me out. You will need an air blower, okay? This type of air blower will not work for getting the shavings out of the cylinder. Basically what I do, and you can see all the bends in my piping because I basically will bend this. If I'm going into the back cylinders, I'll bend it so that it points down into the cylinder. I put it in far enough that it creates basically a swirl, blows the shavings back out. So that's mandatory. You need a kit to do the install. The kit that I use is the CalVan. It's the only kit right now that I trust and I recommend. I'm going to put this in the video real quick for those of you that are at the CalVan company or the specific place that I keep buying my kits from. I have sold so many of these kits for you guys when people call me and ask where I got them. I have to replace the bits on these things because I do so many of them, and I have to keep buying everything. You guys really should be giving me either a kickback or at least replacing my bits for free. I shouldn't be paying $75 for a bit, and you guys are making $250 on every kit that I sell for you. But that's just, you know, that's just me. Anyway, the part number for the CalVan kit is 38900 for the 2-valve. Obviously, you want to check and verify it fits your engine. And go from there. You will need a 7mm socket. I choose to use a 1/4-inch drive with a wobbly. Makes it easier to get into. When I'm doing the last cylinder, cylinder number 8 or cylinder number 10 on most of them, this extension's too long. I actually use a shorter one that's 4 inches, and that's because the way the fuel rail is designed, you can't get this to turn hard enough to get under the firewall. So just to give you a heads up on that. You need a spark plug socket to be able to put your plug in and out. Now here, right now, is when you need to do this. Take your spark plug, verify that your gap and I'm going to do it by looking, and I know these really well. As long as these things have not been dropped, the gaps aren't going to change. Make sure that your electrode is not smashed flat, and put it into your spark plug tool now, because it'll save us video time later. Put yourself a little bit of anti-seize on your threads. Okay, once you got your anti-seize, this is your CalVan insert. Okay, this is just one massive stainless steel insert. It's the best one on the market that I've found. I got 31 years Master Tech experience. Right now, this is the one that I use and the only one I'll use. So the shelf on this right here, I call it the hat. The shelf on this thing actually will sit on a shelf that's in the cylinder head, and as we do the reamer, it's not really technically a drill bit, it's a reamer. As we ream the hole out for these threads, that shelf does not disappear. So when we tighten this down in, we put this down for just a second, if you notice, you have full 10 or 11 threads on the outside of this insert, which is the problem we have in the cylinder heads, is there's only 4 to 5 threads to begin with. When you look inside, there's less threads on the inside, but there are more. There's usually 8 to 10 threads on the inside, and because it's stainless steel, you're not going to have the issue of the threads pulling out. So for those of you that want to send comments and argue with me over that, go right ahead. I've got over 1,000 customers that are satisfied with the way I do this. So, you know, I'm not going to argue it because I haven't had one come back. Go ahead and put your insert on your spark plug right now. Okay, so you're ready to go. The next time we pick this up, it's going to be when we install it into the engine. The spark plug is the install tool for the insert. Okay, make sure you got a piece of paper handy or a piece of cardboard. I actually just tear off a section of my Denso coil pack box because we're going to use JB Weld underneath the hat to seal the compression gases. The one thing that I do change right now, I'm going to give you a heads up. The first 100 or so of these that I did, I noticed they never blew out. But when we went back on my fleet accounts that put 100,000 miles on their vehicle, the inserts would come out with the spark plugs. Okay, so what I've done differently is I JB Weld under the hat, and then I use 271. I think 266 is pretty much the same thing. And red thread locker is what you want. The 271 thread locker is what I use. It's pretty stout, and it takes heat to release it. But if you're pulling your spark plugs when the engines are cool like you're supposed to, the inserts don't come out anymore. So that's one of the things I've changed. Okay, you are going to need a way to drill or to spin your tap. Now, CalVan sends you with the guide for the drill. Can you see that okay? They send you with this guide for the drill. This is going to go down in the hole where the spark plug is. And then this is the reamer. You can call it a drill bit if you want. So that's what's going to ream the hole out. And then they also send you with, the kit also comes with this nice big tap, okay? Now I have 2 guides, and my kit's a little modified, guys. I buy so many of these kits because I wear them out, that what I've done is instead of having to change these 2 over, and if you do this by yourself, you'll know what I'm talking about. This one comes out through the top. Okay, so that's not a problem, but when you go to put the tap in, you're gonna have to find a way to keep it from, you have to put it in from the bottom up, and what I do is I put the O-ring that comes in the kit on that little groove, so that in the event that this thing actually punches through into the cylinder and it drops, it won't go, this won't fall into your piston, because that'll make for a bad day. Remember, when we go to set this thing to close the valves, the piston needs to be at bottom dead center, not top dead center. You don't want the piston at the top where there's a possibility of drilling a hole through it with the bit. I've seen that once from another mechanic that got towed into the shop, and unfortunately there was nothing I could do to fix that. He needed a new piston. So on the new kit that I have, the one thing I noticed is they did change the size. I use a 13mm socket on the tap now. I used to use a 13 on both, but for some reason they're cutting these on a grinder, I guess. This one's actually a 12mm. So if I put the 13 on it, it rattles. I don't want that to happen. You're going to need whichever extension is going to fit the best for you. We'll go over that when we get to the point. The kit will come with a tool that used to look like this. Everything from here over they send you, but I run a different air fitting, so basically what I've done is kind of modified it. This is what tells us when the piston is in the right position. And you'll need something to stir your JB Weld with. Now, I torque my spark plugs to 17 foot-pounds. I'm not going to get into 5 minutes of video argument over the 20 to 30 foot-pounds that some of the guys want to do. It is my professional, experienced opinion that if you've only got 4 aluminum threads holding a steel spark plug in, over tightening the spark plug is going to do nothing more than pull those last 4 threads out, or at least damage them. So 17 foot-pounds is higher than what the factory spec is. The factory spec is, I believe, on this truck is between 12 and 15 foot-pounds. And then we're going to address the rest of that later on. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to put this away because we've already put the NICs on, and we're going to get to the actual video. Pause it, please. All right, so now I'm up here. You don't have to look at my face anymore. We're going to actually get down to some brass tacks, I guess. This is the second cylinder back on a V10. This is cylinder number 7. You can tell this is what the coil should look like, straight up and down. This one blew out, so it's just flopping around basically like a chicken with a broken neck because it snapped the ear off. So the first thing I want you guys to do to be able to save time on the video, the only thing I disconnected on this job to help us with is I took the air snorkel that goes from the air intake over here to the air filter off so that we can see this. If you notice, and this is one of the mistakes I made on the first video because I was ahead of myself trying to make sure I got everything, I didn't plug off the PCV valve inlet on that video, and I had some really nice peers call me up or send me messages saying, hey, you needed to plug the PCV hole, and that was my bad. The good thing is these shavings that possibly could have got down in there weren't an issue. By the way, that truck that we shot that video on has already got 140,000 miles since I've done that repair, and obviously there's no problem with it. But I went ahead and I put rags into the throttle body assembly. I took and I put a bag over the 2 hoses. These 2 hoses are the air hoses the breather hoses that go into the air inlet tube. And then the actual air filter assembly, I got it standing straight up with the air filter facing down, and then I just took a couple of zip ties and put a rag across the top of it so I can blow shavings everywhere I want right now. Pause it. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do now that I got everything blocked off is I'm going to lift this up. On the bottom side of the electrical wiring harness, there's a little push tab right here. Push that and then pull your electrical connector off. Try not to squeeze it too hard, because if you do, oh, this is cool. If you do, this little push tab can snap, and then this won't stay clicked in, and then you'll have to zip tie it or silicone glue it on so that it doesn't pop off and cause a misfire. So as you can tell, the ear on this one is broken off. That's pretty typical. I'm going to give you a heads up right now that I didn't do. This one actually came out with the spark plug on it. That's pretty neat. I'm going to give you a heads up. The bolt assembly that's holding the broken ear down, which is right here. Can you zoom in on that? Okay. Do not take this off yet. And I'm going to explain why really quickly. Right now there is no spark plug in the hole. And when you go to unbolt this plastic is going to crumble most of the time, and it's going to fall down in that hole, and guess what? Now it's in the piston. And plastic doesn't stick to a magnet, so retrieving it is very difficult. So what I do is I wait to take this out until after I've drilled, tapped, and put the spark plug in the hole, and then I take it off, and if anything crumbles, then I can use an air blower and just blow the hole out. It makes it a lot easier. So hopefully that'll be a step to help you guys out. So at this point, the next step I do is going to be to check and verify that there is no insert already in this hole, which is something that I did not do for you guys on the first video. I've noticed a bunch of these things come in with blown spark plugs that somebody's already put the cheap insert that I don't recommend. So I'm going to have my assistant pause the video for a second and I'm going to get my tooling. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I've got my bore scope and I've got a magnet. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send the magnet down in the hole and make sure that I don't hear it click. Nope. And I'm going to do two things right now. I'm going to once again explain to you, see this insert that's in my fingertips right now? The one that's now on the end of the magnet? If it has an insert in it, and you send a magnet down in there, that's what you're going to hear. And if that happens, you have to get this out. These inserts right here are manufactured, I think, both by a company called Helicoil and a company called Save-A-Thread. I'm not going to talk bad about these because I use them all the time on Hondas, Nissans, the import cars, 4-cylinders. They work really good on those. There's a specific reason why they don't work well on the Triton motors. The hole that this spark plug goes down into is tapered, and it's just a light taper, but it's enough that there's no way to get this thing to seat and stay in there. Even with 271 Loctite, they blow back out. So do not put these in your engine. That's my recommendation. You can do what you want. If a mechanic says he can put one in and you want to pay him, I'm just here to show you how to do this the right way the first time, and it's permanent and you're not going to have to worry about it again. These are good inserts, but they are not made for the Triton motor. I don't recommend using them. So this motor does not feel like it has an insert in it, but I'm going to go ahead and send my bore scope camera down in here and let you guys look at what I'm looking at right here, which is, if you look real carefully, you can see the shelf, because the outer ring or the halo around the outside is actually the outside of the shelf, and then the center is actually the hole. And then this one here still has it actually still has the partial threads on it, just the tips that are taken off. And then I'm going to go down in here, and just for protecting my Patuki, I'm going to check and make sure there's no piston damage. The piston looks fine. It looks like it's about mid-travel. At this point, I don't see the valves. Let me straighten my camera out. I don't see the valves protruding into the hole, so the valves at this point look closed to me. If the valves were open, you would see the sides of the valve. There we go. I'm down inside the hole. Okay. So, go ahead and pause. Okay, so now this tool, it comes with the CalVan kit. This is what's going to tell you whether or not your valves are closed and your piston is either all the way up or all the way down. When this blows out, your piston will be in one of two places. It will either be at the very top of its stroke, or it'll be at the very bottom of its stroke the moment it blows. If it's at the top of its stroke, you'll need to rotate the engine around one more revolution on the crankshaft, or actually half a revolution on the crankshaft, to be able to get the piston down at the bottom. But you take this little plunger and you stick it in the hole where the spark plug goes, and then you take the other end of it, you plug it in, and you open your valve up, and you'll hear the air coming through the engine. Now what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go in. On the first video, I turned the bottom of the crankshaft, the crank bolt on the front of the engine with an 18mm socket. There's a quicker way to do it for those of you that can. If you're comfortable putting a socket on there and turning it with a hand wrench or a ratchet, you go right ahead. I'm going to bump the engine with the starter. I'm going to have my assistant focus on this, and you're going to, as soon as it hits where it needs to be, that you're going to see that blow out, you're going to hear it blow out. right, so I was waiting for my air compressor to shut off so we don't have to listen to that thing run. Okay, so when the little plunger blew out, during the pause, I looked down in there with the flashlight and I could see the top of the piston. Remember I told you it stops in 2 different places? So if I put this down through the spark plug hole, it stops right there. That's not where I want the piston to be. Now I am going to tell you right now, one of the things I found out is when you're using this tool and it has the little E-clip on it right here, the E-clip only allows the reamer to go down so far. So the bottom of this little knuckle right here sits in the top of the spark plug hole, and then the reamer only goes so far. And what I found out is as long as this E-clip is on here, I haven't found a cylinder head yet that this punctures all the way through into the cylinder. That's why in the first video I told you I would take the E-clip off and let it drop down to the actual dowel pin. But if you were doing this, and you would have to check to make sure, but basically it doesn't really matter where the piston's at with this particular tool that I'm holding in my hand, because when we're done you're going to notice there's a shelf that's going to show up on the camera, because this doesn't cut all the way down through the cylinder head. It leaves about a 1/16 of an inch shelf or an 1/8 of an inch shelf at the bottom, and I verified that doing the cylinder heads for shops that bring them in. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to put the plunger back in and we're going to reset this so that the piston's down and the valves are closed. So I need to tap the engine to get the valves to open, otherwise it'll just blow back out. So hold on a second. Okay, so now I should be able to plug this on. So what's happening to us right now is it's on the stroke, or the piston hasn't moved far enough to open a valve yet. No, piston hasn't moved far enough. Okay, let me check and see. Yep, we're going down further. Let me see if this is going to blow out now. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so that blew out again. All goes well. This will go all the way down the hole. Yep, it's no longer at the top of the stroke. So to verify, I'm going to turn my bore scope back on, send this thing back down in the hole. Oh, my cameraman says you guys want to see what I'm doing. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just checking to verify that that piston is all the way down. And you see that? The piston's way down there. So right now the valves are closed. That's the reason why the plunger blows out, because the air can't go past the piston as long as there's nothing wrong with the rings, and it can't come through the valves, and the plunger's in the hole, so the plunger blows out. So that's how we line it up. Now it's safe at this point to go ahead and send the reamer down in here and ream this thing out. Now we get to have some fun. Pause, please. Okay, so let's get down to the grassroots part of this. Okay, we're going to ream the hole out for the tap. You can do this 2 different ways. You can drop this into the hole first. I choose to just put it in as an assembly, drop it down in here. I'm going to wait for my assistant to tell me he's zoomed in so he can see what I'm doing. It's going to go into the spark plug hole. I didn't say before, but there's a triangle shape to this insert. I generally put the flat side with the 2 dimples on them facing the valve cover. It'll work pretty much any way as long as this is sitting flat on top of the cylinder head. So get it down in there and wiggle it until that piece goes all the way down in. Okay, once that piece is all the way down in there, we can start drilling. What I choose to use for my drill, and it's worked really well, is a Mac Tools titanium gear reducted 3/8 ratchet. You don't have to have one of these. You can actually, on this particular hole, because it's angled towards us, you could actually use a drill if you wanted to. But because this is more common to use on the other side, and that's the other side of the engine, 3 and 4 are the plugs that blow the most, I decided to go ahead and use this so you can see how it's done. I get to use a longer extension on this side of the engine because I'm not pinned up against the firewall or the AC box like I am on the passenger side. Make sure that my air ratchet is in the what we call righty-tighty position, which is going to spin clockwise. And all we're going to do is pull the trigger. It's going to spin at a constant RPM, and I'm going to put pressure on the head so that I'm pushing down on the bit. And what you're basically looking for, if I can get the fuel injector out of the way without making it leak, hopefully, is, and it's going to be really difficult for my assistant to see this, but that E-clip right now is about a ½ an inch above the guide that's around the reamer. Can you see that? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill until the E-clip hits the guide. And that's that E-clip that I showed you guys earlier. You'll know when the E-clip has hit the guide, because a lot of times the E-clip is spinning with the unit at a certain RPM, and then all of a sudden the E-clip starts to skip, and then it'll come to a stop because you're pushing in on it. Once that happens, just give it a few more spins, and then reach down in there and see if you can get the reamer out. If you can't get the reamer out, just spin it a few times until it loosens up, and it'll usually pull back out by hand. There you go. Okay, drill bit came out by itself, or the reamer came out by itself. I'll put my finger down in the hole and pull the guide out. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to look down in here and make sure that the hole's centered, and it is centered. Okay, now from this point right here, I'm going to remove the shavings out of this cylinder, and my assistant's leaning on my air blower. Okay, now I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a tip. I get a lot of comments about vacuuming these chips out versus blowing these chips out. I'm going to have my assistant Justin zoom in as much as he can in this area, and I'm going to show you just how many chips are coming out. When we're done, there's almost nothing left in this cylinder, and whatever's left in the cylinder is so small and insignificant. It's aluminum, it's soft, porous metal. Your valves, your cylinders, everything inside the engine except the piston is made of steel, and tiny little pieces of aluminum are not going to hurt it if they're in there. But if you blow long enough, the shavings will all disappear. It's just a matter of how much patience that you have. I'm using an air compressor that's an 80-gallon tank right now, and it's pushing 110 psi. So, you zoomed in? Okay, so watch the shavings. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to turn my bore scope back on. I'm going to go back down inside this hole, and I'm going to look. Bore scope camera got a little crooked on me. I'm going to look and see what's in this hole. Sometimes the camera gets a little bit of crud on it, so I wipe the camera lens off. If you look down in there, there are no significant chunks. There's just a couple of little bitty pieces. I'm not going to worry about those now because I still have to tap the head, which is going to make more metal. But all the big spiral debris is gone. All the stuff that would stick and hold the valve open is already out of the cylinder. So now the next step that we have is to send the tap down in here. One of the other things I'm going to tell you guys I get a lot of comments on is why don't I use grease? That's going to be part of the question and answer towards the end. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this down in here. Wiggle it until the guide goes down on the cylinder head. I'm going to swap my socket out since it's a different size socket on the tap now, for me anyway. Your tool may vary. Seems like they're making them different every time I order one. Okay, so on this, basically what we're going to do is we're going to spin it clockwise. We're going to go in about 2 threads. And then we're going to reverse the air ratchet. Put it back on there and then back it 2 threads. And then we're going to straighten it back out. And we're going to go in, back it up a half a thread or so. And what I'm doing is I'm going in a couple of threads and I'm backing it out. Going in and backing it out. And what that does is that when as it's cutting the new threads, when you're backing it off, it keeps the larger threads from curling up and damaging the ones below it. And at some point, it's even going to, it came to a stop, okay? That's because there's that shelf I told you that the reamer doesn't punch through. So at this point, I'm going to double check by twisting my ratchet, and yes, it's tight. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to take back it all the way out. I'm going to lift my, my tap up here. And just to verify, this is why this bore scope is so important, guys. Just to verify that this thing tapped all the threads, I'm going to go down in here and check it. And there's that little shelf at the bottom that kept the tap from going all the way through. But you see down in here, see all that metal? Can you see that, or is it glaring?
It's okay.
Okay, see that big pile of metal? You don't want to start the engine. Guys will talk about, well, what they do after they drill is they just start the engine up and let all this stuff blow out. The problem I have with that is if any of the big chunks get stuck to the backside of the face of the valve, they will hold the valve open and there's a possibility of piston to valve damage. The other thing it'll do is that it can blow debris up into the intake manifold and it gets sucked down into other cylinders, and then it can hold multiple valves open. The third part is that all that debris could never come out of the hole, go out the exhaust valve, and now you've got a partially plugged catalytic converter potentially. So this is the reason why blowing it out is so important. So what we're going to do now is the second step of cleaning the cylinder out. So I'm going to put my blower back down in here. You can see all the metal coming out. Just wiggle it around a little bit, but try to keep, if you're using a metal blower like mine, try not to let the tip of it scratch the cylinder walls. I try to keep it in the center. And after you get about 10 or 15 seconds without seeing any shavings come out, go ahead and send your bore scope back down in there. At that point, you're pretty much clean. If it's not throwing 1 or 2 shavings out at you. See that big pile of metal's gone? The only thing there is there's a couple of tiny little pieces of scrap down next to the edge. And like I said, I've done over 1,000 of these. I've never had one come back with engine damage. You know, never had a ring problem or any of that. This stuff will eventually just go right out the exhaust. It's so small. Most of the particles are small enough they'll actually go through the catalytic converter. So that part's done. So go ahead and pause the video for a second. Okay, trying to get this done as quickly as we can. We've already, at the beginning of the video, put the insert on the spark plug with with Loctite, that's funny, with anti-seize. Listen to what I mean, not what I say. Which helps you out. You always want to use anti-seize on your plugs. Nowadays, even if it's metal or aluminum, just use it. It's the best thing to do. Okay, here's one of the things I've changed since the first video that'll help you guys out. Okay, we're gonna, on the JB weld, Sometimes getting the cap off is fun. Squeeze out just a little puddle. That's all you need to do. Well, that was more than I needed. Like I said, you'll be throwing some of this stuff away anyway, so it's not a big deal. So mix this up. It's going to start out black and white, and you're going to mix it probably for 10-15 seconds. Depends on how well you mix. I use a little screwdriver. And you're going to mix it until it turns into a nice consistent gray color. Don't worry about the stuff on the outer borders. You don't have to have every little bit in here. You just have to make sure that the stuff that you're going to use is stirred up. Okay, so the underneath of this shelf is going to seal this insert from compression gases being able to come out if the threads have a little bit of a bypass on compression gases, is what I believe it's for. I haven't actually talked to the engineers for CalVan. I'd really like to talk to one of them sometime just to find out some simple questions myself. But like I said, I've been doing so many of these things that I guess I've kind of become the YouTube authority on these inserts because I get so many people asking me to do them. So once I do that, I just take a rag and wipe my screwdriver clean. Otherwise I'll end up with a non-functional screwdriver. So we just put a little bit of JB Weld just on the hat. This is something that I've done different. Now, at this point, I do a couple of strips of 271 Loctite on the actual threads of the spark plug, or the outside of the sleeve, not the spark plug. You do not want to red thread lock the plug into the insert. You're only thread locking your insert into the cylinder head. That way it stays there. So at this point, my assistant wants to come around. We're going to take this and we're going to put it into the spark plug hole, and we're going to tighten it down by hand as far as we can get it to go. Then we're going to take, I just use a stubby ratchet to just cinch it down. Once I get that done, I will disappear out of the video. I will grab my torque wrench, which is already preset to 17 foot-pounds, and I will torque my spark plug. There we go. You heard the click. Okay, so 17 foot-pounds spark plugs in it. At this point, I will take my 7mm and safely remove the bolt that is holding the broken ear down. Now at this point, if any debris falls inside the hole, whether it's the bolt or the plastic, I can just simply blow it out or go in with a pick or whatever and get it out. But this is the piece that breaks off the coil pack. Okay, I'll drop that down right there on the front of the vehicle for now. This particular coil pack already comes with dielectric grease in the end of the spark plug boot. So that's one of the other things I do like about the Denzos. Now Denso, I believe, is a manufacturer for Ford for their coil packs. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I heard. But these coil packs are really good coil packs. I haven't had one of these things come back under warranty for a failed coil. So we're going to take this, and if I quit jerking around and get this thing on here, I'm going to run this thing down by hand, the 7mm. I'm going to take the electrical connector and make sure that it gives me a click, and it did. And so we're on. This job is now officially done. This is a permanent fix. The last thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take my air blower and I'm going to get rid of all the shavings on the engine. And we're going to move into our question and answer because this job is done. I can't start the engine up right now to show you that it's nice and quiet, and obviously it will be because it's got a spark plug in it. So let's move into our question and answer time, and we'll do this. Go ahead and face me. All right, so in the last 2.5 years or so since this video's been, my first video got shot, I have 5 questions that get asked to me all the time. And a lot of people will send emails, some people they'll call me. More phone calls than anything, which is fine. I love talking to you guys. I'm trying to help you out the best I can. But these are in order pretty much the number one questions. Number one is, do I have to repair all the cylinders at once? In other words, does the customer that blew the spark plug have to insert every one of these holes? At my shop right now, the current rate to do this repair that you just watched me do, with the broken coil pack, all the parts and labor, is $284.99. That covers everything out the door. Pause. Okay, I was thinking about saying something else, but it's going to get addressed with another question. Okay, question number two, or actually I'm going to answer question number one. No, you do not. The answer to question number one, do you have to do all the holes? No. This truck right here has blown 3 spark plugs out and it's a 10-cylinder. I've done the other 2. The first cylinder to blow on this was cylinder 5. The second cylinder to blow was cylinder number 9, and then this one was cylinder number 7. We have not gone in. I'm going to help them on this one. What I recommend doing is changing all the spark plugs and torquing them all down, and when you have the plugs out, go ahead and check the threads and make sure that all the threads are intact. So question number 2 is, how do I get the shavings out? Well, we kind of went over that. I know I talk a lot, but I try to get as much information to you as I can. Information that I believe is honest and true to my heart and how I do it. And because I don't have problems, at least nobody's ever called me with an issue, I rarely deviate from how I do things, because once you find a way to do it right, why change? So you don't have to change them all. And the shavings are just a matter of just taking your time and blowing with high compressed volume air until all those shavings are gone. I will tell you, every once in a while when I fire one of these up, there will be a misfire on the cylinder that we drilled and tapped, but it seems to go away either after the first test drive or in most cases after about 10 or 15 seconds of idling. My guess is that's due to a couple of issues. One of them is that cylinder hasn't been firing. Most of the time the truck or the car has been driven with the spark plug blown out, and there is excess fuel laying on top of the piston from the injector firing, but the spark plug not burning it. And then some of it is just the small debris that's left in there that does get stuck on the face of the valve. That isn't an issue. It has to take time to get past the valve, but I think that's very minimal. But no matter what, we end up with the misfire sometimes, and that just goes away. So number 3 is, why don't I use oil or grease on the drill and tap? Okay, that's really a long explanation. I'm going to give you the short of it. My first 100 or so of these inserts that I did the way CalVan said, and I used the JB weld, nearly every one of the inserts came back out when we changed the spark plugs. They didn't blow out, they simply unscrewed with the spark plug. I've made comments on some of my other videos. That's why the 271 Loctite's being used now. So the reason I don't use the oil or grease is because, one, I change my tools a lot. You heard me say that at the beginning of the video. I go through a lot of them. This particular design, the way we glue them in, if you use grease, it leaves grease residue behind, and even though you blow the shavings out of the hole, there's no way to get the grease off of where you tapped. And then when you go to put the thread locker in there, the thread locker ends up on top of grease, and everybody knows that that's not a permanent bond. So if I just drill and tap dry, which doesn't damage anything, and I haven't had any issues with it, the Loctite and the JB weld seems to stick better. So that's number 3. Number 4 is, why does it happen? Don't need to answer that. Go look for my video that said that's labeled, why did the spark plug blow out of my Ford Triton motor? That video says it all. So question number 4 is answered on another video. Question number 5, and the last question we're going to answer before we end the video, is, I've blown one spark plug out. What do you recommend to do at this point? Okay, if this happens, what I normally want to see is, I want to see the customer authorize me an additional 2 hours to 2.5 hours to remove and replace all the spark plugs, check all the threads, and torque them all down properly. Yes, I think there's an issue with the way the heads are designed on this engine. I am a firm believer that it is a design flaw in the cylinder head. There's not enough threads to tighten a spark plug down at 30 pounds of torque, which is, I think, 25 to 30 pounds is where they should be torqued to, and they can't be, because if you stretch it that hard, it's going to pull the threads, in my opinion. So basically, I've had 4 of the last 6 of these that I've done that the customers have authorized me to go ahead and just tune the engine, change the spark plugs. During those particular jobs, I have found at least one other spark plug that came out by hand, literally unscrewed by hand without having to use a wrench. So that was another plug that was going to blow that we wouldn't have found. That's why I don't like to just fix them when they come in and ship them out the door, which is what a lot of customers choose to go with, because tuning these motors is about $250 to $300 parts and labor if you do it properly, depending on the year and the model. So that's in addition to the repair job. So pretty much that covers the top 5 questions that I get asked. I hope this video wasn't too long and bored you to death. This is how we do it start to finish. I do these without shooting a video in about 25 to 30 minutes to do them properly. This job is done, it's permanent, we're finished. My name is Ron, I'm with Mobile Fix Automotive. My card was at the very beginning of the video. You're welcome to give me a call if you want me to do this job for you and you're in the local area, or you can have your vehicle towed down here. By all means, call me, set up an appointment. I'll get you in and out and get you fixed up like I am this gentleman right here, and I want to thank him once again for letting me use his truck for the video, and we will see you on the next video. Thanks for your time.